Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are, near or far, high or low. Welcome back to the Coach G podcast. And today, listeners, I'm super excited, honestly, because I have a powerhouse in the world of athletic performance, Coach Nate Melendez. Nate first came on to share his journey from training NBA athletes to lead in strength and conditioning at the University of Miami. His hard hat mentality and blue collar approach to performance training left a big impact on the listeners. And in part two of this episode, we're going to be diving even deeper, talking about advanced strategies, pro level habits, recovery innovations, and what truly separates good players from great ones. So if you're serious about leveling up your performance, this episode is packed with gems that you do not want to miss. So listeners, give a warm welcome the returning guest, Coach Nate Melendez. Appreciate you, Coach.
Thanks for having me. What an intro, man. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. And honestly, like so much to unpack with you. But before we even get started, this is like part two of the podcast. How was your physical and how was your mental 2025?
Yeah, physical and mental is good, man. I'm 37, which is weird to say, but I'm still active. Still getting my workouts in, try to compete with these young boys, even on the basketball court. So, man, I can't complain.
Man, and just since our last conversation, how has your approach evolved, especially working with multi-sport collegiate athletes versus basketball specific athletes?
Yeah, I think we kind of touched on it before. The mental side, dive deep into that. The mental side is even more important the higher levels you get. So for me, going from NAIA, or actually let me retract, going from NBA to NAIA and then up to a Power Five, obviously the mental side needs to be obviously advanced. So for me, just kind of dive deeper into the kind of the mental side of athletic performance. I know we're going to talk about this in a little bit, but just the NIL and kind of what comes with that as far as all the pressure that these kids are experiencing. So again, just kind of diving into kind of the mental side of the games.
See, and you just even brought up on something that is super interesting, and it's interesting because there was always conversations about players at the college level should be receiving some type of endorsement or financial support from them playing at that level. And now that it's happened, it's created a new conversation of how players should manage it. It's even swaying some players from going from one college to another. So for yourself, coach, see, dealing with it firsthand, how have you adapted, I guess, to the new conversation of NIL?
Yeah, I think, and if you look at kind of the NBA draft, the guys that are coming out, I think there was only 107 guys that came out earlier and did NBA's draft.
Crazy.
The year before was 210, and the year before that was in the 300s. So it's just making an impact. I mean, whether it's making the game better or worse, I mean that's not my call. But again, NIL is a real thing. Obviously, we're in the early stages of the NIL, so it's almost like the wild west. Can't blame the athletes for trying to get the most money they can. But yeah, it's definitely different. It's definitely different. There's no blueprint to how to navigate through it. It's going to take you a couple years to kind of figure out how to navigate through it. But yeah, NIL, man, those guys are making a lots of money.
Right. And just kind of reflecting on what we spoke about in part one of our podcasts. I mean, I learned honestly a lot about having that hard hat mentality. So, how do you sustain that level of effort and culture over a full season, and especially during those rough stretches or even sometimes losing streaks?
Yeah, I think seeing the big picture, understanding it's bigger than the game, is bigger than the weight room. Obviously, the added stress of playing a Power Five basketball is it's already stressful enough, and then you add obviously the academic side for the players, and then obviously the pressure to win for the coaching staff. So it is a real deal. So again, it's important to kind of obviously breathe, lean on people. Obviously, I leaned on my wife a lot, talking to my kids, just being around what makes me happy. And just talking to other coaches, understanding that obviously we go through stuff as well.
Oh, sure.
On the mental side, that I think is important for us to kind of share that as well. But again, for me, just kind of always looking at the glass half full. There's gonna be losing streaks. There's gonna be winning streaks. Just not being too high and not being too low, and just kind of taking it for what it is.
Right. And just I mean, you do what you do at such a high level, and it's just so dope just to see the growth coach, and again, just the passion and just the attention to detail. Because especially when you're dealing with these athletes at the college level, some of them are going to be on, sorry, will become pros, or some just want to be able to be fit overall. And you're kind of introducing them into what a healthy lifestyle looks like, but also what a routine looks like in the training room, or just being on the court, or just what overall fitness looks like. So for yourself, Coach Nate, like what are some underrated or even overlooked components of strength and conditioning that you think could give basketball players a competitive edge?
Yeah, I think the weight room, I think for the most part, I think at any level, if you're in the research and you have a passion for this, I want to say a lot of the stuff is pretty pretty the same across the board as far as what we do in the weight room. But I think what's gonna separate you as a coach is if players buy in, right? I think
Love that.
players don't care. So players don't care how much you know until they know you care about them. So for me coming in, that's always been my bread and butter, is always kind of building that relationship with the players. Now, for me, how I approach that when it comes to NIL and kind of that type of stuff, obviously these athletes are, we talked about it before, they're dealing with a lot already. So a lot of people are asking them to be certain places, or even asking them for money. I mean, that's a real thing. So for me as a coach, just asking them, what do they need from me? I think that's kind of an eye opening that they're not used to. So again, once you build that trust, building a rapport, we touched on it in our first podcast about building relationships outside the weight room, outside the basketball court. I think that's obviously that's very important for me. But for me, honestly, what kind of allowed me to kind of, especially going from NAIA in the middle of the season to a Power Five, and what allowed players to buy into kind of my system and who I am, honestly, is being able to hoop. I think that
I
goes a
love that.
long way. Being able to,
Love that.
because obviously that's their escape.
Mm.
That's what they're good at. Honestly, that's what they get paid to do. So for me, being able to kind of play one on one with them, being able to kind of shoot with them, being able to be in the competitive myself, a former basketball player myself, that competitive hard hat kind of get
Yes,
it
I
out.
love it.
But again, for me, understood that the players understand that, hey, you know how to hoop as well. I think that kind of allows the players to buy and kind of build that trust. So for me, being able to hoop, I think kind of goes a long way for sure.
Love that, man. I love that. I could just tell Coach Nate still getting those buckets off, and maybe sometimes I'm like, wait, Coach Nate, I never knew you could. Coach, and Coach Nate's like, yes, I can still get by you with score. So I love that. I love that, man.
Yeah, there was a couple guys that have said that said I beat you 11-0, and like, you're not, no, no, no. I'm not getting 0 points. So I want to playing a couple guys. I want to scoring 6 or 7.
Right.
But again, to me, that's a win.
Yes.
But just kind of doing that and building that relationship and just showing the competitive side that I have, I think that really allows players to kind of buy into my system, my philosophy, understand who I am as a coach, as a husband, as a father, also being a mentor. That all comes from the game of basketball. And I think that's very important. I'm not saying that as a strength coach, you need to be able to play. But for me, I got to play at a high school level. I didn't play college, but again, being able to boot, being able to kind of speak that language, being in those positions, I think really, really kind of pushed me over the edge, especially for me coming from NAIA to a Power Five in the middle of a season, in the middle of a losing streak. It's like, hey, here's another coach that's gonna try to tell me what to do. But it's not. No, I'm just like you guys. I listen to the same type of music, and yeah, I'm able to hoop as
Right.
well. So.
Even for you, because you mentioned it, and I didn't even realize it can happen halfway through. Like, how was that adjustment for you making that shift from NAA to now a Power Five conference? Like, how was that shift for you? I mean, did it take you a minute, or kind of how did you adjust to that type of transition?
Yeah, for me, I think the only difference is obviously the lights and the resources that they have. But for me, so for the first few days, it was just like, wow, I'm really here. Obviously, lights and resources, and just obviously the weight room itself, as nice as it was. But for me, basketball is basketball, and again, I looked at it as a customer service job. So my job, no matter where I'm at, high school, middle school, NAIA pros, Power Five, is to create to provide customer service, and that's exactly what I do.
Right. Right. And even you just spoke about something that is so key, which is, why you are where you are today, and just how you're able to do it at such a high level. The foundation being getting players to buy in. And you said it so well, coach. Like players don't care how much you know until they know how much you care about them, the individual, the person before the player that comes after, And when you have players that are really bought in, like how do you use whether it's performance data or force plates or things of that nature to drive individual decisions for play development or even workload management?
Yeah, I think some of the biggest hurdles as strength coaches is obviously we talked about the buy-in, but getting players to actually give effort in the weight room. Again, we're asking a lot from our players. Again, they practicing for a couple hours, they do film, everything is organized. They have tutors. I mean, they have classes, they have the outside life. So for me, what I personally use was an attendance, kind of like a net scoring. So do players want to be there with you? Are players excited to be there with you? Are they messaging you to get some work in? So for me, that's what I use
Good radar.
for player buy-in. As an individual coach, do athletes want to be there with you? What's their energy level? So that way that we can get the most out of the lift. And are players actually hitting you up outside a weight room house to get some work in? I think that's what you want to see. And that's how I gauge kind of obviously my coaching style and kind of how I was able to kind of get the players to buy
Right.
in.
Right. And I guess that kind of makes your job in a way easier because then you're really able to see who is ready to really lock in or who wants to invest in themselves to really take their game to the next level. So that kind of just, it's like in a way they're meeting you halfway, which kind of makes the job a little bit more easier. So,
Yeah, like I said, the mental side, again, we're asking a lot from these kids, and it's just how can we make their life easier? Like we still got to get the work in, but again, building that rapport and building that buy-in, and actually listen to the players, not just doing it your way. But I think for me, I like to create a lot of autonomy when it comes to those lifts. Obviously, there's some non-negotiables that I have, but creating that autonomy and actually listen to the players, I think goes a long way for
right.
sure.
That's big time, man. In your experience, coach, like how important is individualized training versus team-based programming when it comes to player progression, but also injury prevention?
Yeah, I think everybody is different. The good thing about basketball, there's only 12 to 15 players. So I think you are able to have individualization opposed to maybe like a football that has 100 or soccer that has a larger group. So how we did it, we just there was three different types of groups. Usually it's the freshmen, the second and third year guys, and then our senior more mature guys. So that's how we were able to do it. It was myself as an assistant strength coach, and there's our head strength and conditioning coach Brandon Kuhn. So the more eyes we've had, the better we can individualize the program itself.
And just out of curiosity, like this is me just going kind of just not even reading the questions, kind of just off the dome right now because you just inspired a thought. Like, what's when you look at because I mean you are an expert just at movement and how the body should move and things of that nature, coach. Like when you're looking at a player on the court, how they walk, how they go for a layup, their lateral movement. What are some of the or what is that diagnosis that you do in your mind mentally, just out of habit? Like what are some of the things you're looking for? Okay, that kind of gets you to the point where okay, I know that this person needs to work in their balance. This person, how they're moving, they need to work on their agility. This person needs to work on their landing mechanics. Like, what's that kind of diagnosis that you do to kind of assess the players that you have in front of you?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is understanding that the game itself is a metric. I
Mm,
think that's so important to be at practices, to be at games. I think that's very important to see how they move. Even playing one on one, I
okay.
think obviously mental note to kind of making that mental note of like, hey, they're not able to push off right. They're not able to push off left. They don't know how to push off right. They don't know how to push off left. So yeah, even though I am having fun, I can't help but obviously kind of go to that breakdown as I'm playing. But yeah, the game is the metric itself. Obviously, there is some assessments that we do inside the weight room that does transfer over, but I'd rather them be successful on the court opposed to the weight room. So I think the understanding that the game itself is a metric for sure.
Game itself is a metric. I like that. I like that, coach. And I mean, you've worked with, I mean, you are working with high level college players and you've worked with NBA players. So, what are some pro level habits that you think college or even high school players should start to implement right now?
So going from NAIA to a Power Five, I realized obviously the skill level is so advanced at the Power Five level. And what that basically means is that those athletes just specialize a little bit earlier. So what I was doing at the NAI level, I'm not able to do at the Power Five just because the skill acquisition is so high at the Power Five level that they just need some general prep, some GPP kind of during the time in season, off season, because they're so skilled in advance, opposed to obviously the NAI level where things are a little bit different. But I mean, that was my biggest takeaway. They're so skilled that they just need general fitness qualities that I think would translate to the game itself.
And you even just said a word there. I just want to get a definition. You said GBP, did you say? Or GPP?
Yeah, GPP. Yep.
What's the meaning of that, coach?
Yeah. So it's just general physical prep preparedness.
I got you.
So it's just a GPP phase, just your foundational movements, right? Push, pull, hinge, squat. Those movements that we kind of take for granted, you'd be surprised. Again, the higher level that they are, the more they struggle with kind of those foundational movements. So just kind of stripping away all the bells and whistles and just being able to kind of really, really harp on kind of GPP and kind of getting them into those positions just because they specialize so early. Hence the reason why they're at the Power Five level.
And would you say, I'm curious now, like, because you look at players like, Steve Nash, rest in peace, Kobe, and there's others that I can bring to example. What made them great at their specific sport was growing up, they played, football, basketball, tennis. So therefore, they're learning not just the mental side of like spacing and angles, but physically their lateral movement, their footwork, their hand-eye coordination, let's say, really makes them a little bit more well-rounded as a athlete. So for yourself, what's your thoughts on just kind of players growing up, just in general, trying out different sports? Like, is there like a pro and con to being a sport specific athlete, or do you see some of the benefits for just players coming from a multifaceted athletic background?
Yeah, so there was a study done with NFL players a while back that talked about multi-sport versus single sport. And a good portion of those athletes that got drafted in the NFL, specifically the first round, they played multiple sports in high school, basketball, baseball. So I think that's very important. Actually, one of our guys who was one of our best offenders at the University of Miami, just kind of building that rapport, ask him questions. He played tennis from the age of 6 to 16, and he was our best defender.
Okay.
So being able to move laterally, it just made sense. So it was, again, that's so important because there's some stuff that we can't mimic in the weight room that you may have to get from other sports growing up. I personally have a 11-year-old son. He's done baseball, he's done soccer, he's done basketball. I think that's so important. And as he gets older in age, I think we can kind of specialize a little bit more. But the more well-rounded you are in the sports that you play, I think the better athlete and the more chance to any sport that you want to do. So I think it's very
Right.
important.
Right. And just again, to kind of come back to talking about recovery, which I think is so key. And even for me, I didn't really entertain just the importance of stretches, nutrition, and just being able to just have better mobility. That's the end result means I'm not getting injured. So for yourself, coach, like what new methods or tools have you seen work well recently that players at any level could try?
Yeah, the best ones are free. Sleep, nutrition, hydration. Obviously, nutrition and hydration is not free, but sleep is the best recovery method that you could use. Now, I would say routine is more important than the actual means of recovery because it varies depending on athlete. But I think finding what works for you, if it's an ice bath, if it's sauna, if it's red light therapy, if it's mindfulness. There's a lot of things that you can do, but you got to find what works for you. But the king of all recovery is going to be sleep, and then all the other ones you can be used as well. So whatever works for you. But I think the biggest thing is gotta find what works for you, find your routine. If that works for you, it may not work for another person, but as long as you're doing it every single day, I think that's very vital to athletic development.
Right. Right. And even for players who, they've got that routine down and they're really taking care of their body, their mind, however that looks, whether it's, sleep or reading a book or even just getting, like a light little weight room session or getting their shots up. Like for players who are really trying to make that jump to the next level, coach, like what separates those who level up from those who just plateau from a physical but also mental standpoint?
Yes, finding a routine, finding whatever that routine is and sticking with it, whether it's pregame shots, post-game shots, whether you get your 10 hours of sleep, whether you have some compression pants. But again, it's just finding that routine. It's not easy, but it is simple. It all comes down to how much work you put in. So what you put in, you get out of. I think that's very important at the Power 5 level. The skill level is so high, I can only imagine obviously at the NBA levels and other professional organizations that again, find what works for you and then stick to it. But again, whatever your routine is, I think that's very important to kind of do. But again, just being consistent with and just showing up every day with a positive attitude. And they're trying to get 1% better. I think that's very important.
Right. Right. Even it's funny, I was just before we started this podcast, I was kind of going through your Instagram one more time. And I mean, you're certified across multiple areas, coach. It's really impressive. So I mean, how does your expertise in corrective exercise or even weightlifting specifically support basketball performance in ways most people might not even expect?
Yeah, I'm gonna be honest. I steal a lot of stuff from other
Mm,
people. That's what other coaches
yeah,
do. I'm not afraid to
I do the same
do,
thing.
so
Yeah.
I'm not afraid to be wrong. I have a passion for this. I have a desire to get better every single day. And if that's going to somebody that knows more than me, then I'm all for it. Going to conferences. Obviously, I have my research and application channel that I'm always adding research articles into that. It's just a daily process. It's the same mindset that I may had as a basketball player. I just bring it to this profession. It's just showing up every day, working on my craft every single day, and just getting 1% better. But I don't want to take all the
Mhm.
credit. Some of that stuff definitely stole it from other coaches. I didn't want to give them their props. But again, just asking questions, shadowing other coaches, being around other great coaches, listening to podcasts like yours. I think that's very important.
Right. And what's one thing I think I don't want to limit it to just basketball. Just what's one thing, coach, that every athlete, player listening to this episode can do today just to start training smarter and not just harder?
Yeah, I think listening to your body is very important. Being up to date with some sort of research. Again, it doesn't have to be strength and conditioning research. Again, they can just be asking vets, older players, older brothers, having mentors of, hey, what works for you? And how can I obviously not go through the same pitfalls? I think it's very important to not have an ego, especially if you're trying to get better. I think those that want to get better in any profession, whether you're a basketball player or whether you're a strength and conditioning coach, I think ego sometimes kills a lot of the knowledge that's out there just because you think you know it all. But being vulnerable, asking questions, and just wanting to get better, having that desire, I think that that's what I'll again allow you to kind of get to the next steps for
Right.
sure.
Right. And that's something that really stood out to me, coach, when you said obviously, whether it's the weight room or on court stuff, you have your non-negotiable, which I think is super key. But the other thing that really stood out when you said it, coach, was that you're still very much adaptable to what the athlete needs in that present moment. So, like, kind of making that transition now again. And it's a common problem that I've come across, and I'm curious to get your mind if you've come across it as well. But this, like, you have quite a few players who might suffer from shin splints, which tend to be quite a common issue for basketball players. Like, what are some of the main causes behind them, and what can athletes do to prevent or effectively treat them?
Yeah, so from my understanding, shin splints are just an overuse injuries. Now, what I like about what we do and me is I like to stay in my scope of practice. That goes hand in hand with talking to other coaches, talking to your medical staff on some strategies to use to kind of get over kind of those injuries, in which we see a lot of those injuries, knee issues, ankle issues, low backs. But again, just having a strategic plan in place already, just in case something like that happened, being proactive instead of reactive, but leaving that up to the medical staff, athletic trainers, physical therapists, staying in your lane. I think sometimes we have a good heart, but I think we sometimes dabble into other people's practices that I think can rub people the wrong way. But again, just having that open line of communication with your medical staff, your head coaches, with the player itself, I think that's very important to listen. But again, just kind of stay in your lane and kind of and being proactive instead of reactive to minimize those injuries for
Right.
sure.
Right. And just even on that, coach, like when you kind of just look back at just how much you've done, and to be honest, I feel like your book is still very much being written. And I must say, actually, thank you so much for adding me, because I'm in that Instagram group where I'm going through the research papers, and that's just even keeping me up on game. And just some of the research out there is just like fascinating. So for yourself, because I'm thinking, wow, like he's gone through this and shared it with us, but I'm thinking, wow, so if he's sending the stuff that he finds that is valid and important, I could only imagine how many content and articles you go through. So for yourself, coach, like how do you keep that balance of, yes, you want to consume a lot of information, but how do you kind of filter through what you need to apply now versus what you might apply or try out later?
Yeah, I think it's important, obviously, like you mentioned, just to be up to date with the latest research. Quantifying your research is very important. Systematic reviews, which is just a whole bunch of research articles built into one. That's my go-to. Now, if it's a limited sample size, I try to limit that. If there's no limitations, if I feel like there's some biases, I try to eliminate that. So just as a filtering process before it even goes out to that channel. But yeah, there's a lot of stuff. There's a lot of great stuff. There's a lot of stuff that is not so great, but understanding research is very important. There was a course that I took with Dr. Ramsey. He works at the University of Kansas, and he talks about just applying the research and how important that is, and obviously filtering some of the research, and that way you're just not overtaxed with kind of that information overload. But I think it's very important to obviously stay up to date with the latest research. And for me, when I put those research articles in the channel, I just give a quick summary and abstract, but it's up to the reader, it's up to the user to figure out how they want to apply that information. So I never say, hey, this is how you should apply it. I give maybe my opinion, what works for me, but I'm always open to different ideas on how to use the research in programming. What I love about this field is the fact there's always new research. You always got to be up to date with the latest research, and there's not one size fits all. It's always going to be, it depends, and always it's always going to be based on the university, what you have at hand, how many coaches you have. So even with that, you can there's so many avenues that you can take, but it's always up to the individual to kind of apply the information as I may. But yeah, research for me has always been paramount to become a better coach, not only from a strength and conditioning side, but from a sports psychology side. I think is very important as well.
And just you even said something there, like, and this is something I'm really, it's a conscious effort now to understand that it's not one size fits all. You know, it could be the example of how I shoot could be slightly different from how another person shoots. So the advantage that I tell my players, like, you know, if you like, your advantage offensively will look different from your teammates' advantage. You know, like you might be comfortable catch and shoot three, but if you pass the ball to your teammate in the corner, their advantage isn't going to be a catch and shoot. They're more comfortable driving to the basket and scoring. So kind of applying that to whether it's the weight room or just like motor skills or just moving your body the right way. Would you say, I understand every person's body is different and every athlete moves the same, but would you say even though there's variance in between that, would you say every player still shares like similar mechanics or concepts, or does it really, really vary from athlete to athlete?
Oh man, that's a hard question to answer because obviously everybody is different. But I think it also depends on coaching philosophy. What does coach want to get from the players? Is he more a defensive coach? Is he a half court coach? Does he want to play fast? So obviously we try to bucket those athletes, whether it's like long wingspan, being up and down, whether it's more conditioning we got to work on. But it also depends on kind of the coaching philosophy. And our job as strength and conditioning coaches is to reiterate the head coach's philosophy inside the weight room. So I think that's very important as well.
Right, and just making that shift now. I mean, I know you've been through this segment, but I'm curious to get your mind on the part two. You know, this segment I like to call just beyond the game segment. When it comes to skill, and again, this could go the basketball route or just life in general, coach. Like, what would you say is a skill that is taught by many but only mastered by a few?
Oh, wow, that's a great question. This may or may not apply, but I think understanding the game and where you're supposed to be at offensively and defensively. I think we mentioned this in the first podcast. That's so vital. And I think that's the big separator. You can be athletic, you can run fast, you can jump high, but if you're not in the right position offensively and defensively, you're just not going to see the
Sure.
floor. And I think that's so important. Obviously, all universities and all teams have their
Right.
film study, but the great ones, the ones that really want to get better, the 1% that do want to make it past college and get paid to play basketball, I think those are the ones that are watching film
Mm,
study, not necessarily highlights, but again, film study, understanding what the coach is asking. Are you in hot offensively, defensively? Are you in the right position? I think that's to me, that's the biggest separator. And you can say that's a
yeah.
skill. It's tedious, it's hard. You have to be vulnerable because they're going to be in a lot of times when the player's in and not a good position. And that takes a lot. I think we always want to be the best versions of ourselves. And I think that's where the ego comes into play. I already know this. It's like, no, you don't know this. I think that's the big separator. Understanding the game, not just watching highlights, but understanding where you're supposed to be in offensively and defensively. I think that's a skill in itself for
Sure, and you
sure.
just mentioned something that is key, like being vulnerable, because how I related to that was learning isn't supposed to look perfect straight off the bat. I mean, I'm sure you've seen it, coach, where you're dealing with high level athletes, but they're not gonna have the perfect, bench press or deadlift off the bat, and again, it takes them being vulnerable and kind of just honest with themselves and the coaches, and even being in a safe enough environment to ask the question like, what could I do better? And just again, giving their athletes grace and time and space that if we just keep on again just having that hard hat mentality, just being consistent, that you're going to get better and better each day just makes the difference, man. So that was a good point, coach. Honestly, great point.
Yeah, I think a new kind of philosophy that I came across, which makes so much sense, and then this can be applied to the game of basketball, the game of life. Burn the boats. I think burn the boats is an analogy of just kind of giving it your all, kind of no retreating. I think that was kind of my mindset going in. Willing to do whatever it takes at my job to make sure I'm giving these athletes the best coach possible. I think burning a boat is just a mantra that I live by. Again, just being all in. I think that's very important. But again, being all in to kind of getting better, being like whatever it takes. I think that's so important. And again, nobody wants to be wrong, but I think if that's going to make you better in the long run to help you win more ball games to make you better, I think that's important for sure.
Right. Right. And just the next one, coach, is the best piece of advice you've ever received.
Best piece of advice you ever received. Wow, that's a good one. I would say no journey is the same. I think it's important to run your own race, right? Kind of have those blinders on. I think that's very vital. Again, not just as a strength coach, but as a podcaster, as a basketball player as well. I think it's very important to run your own race, right? Some people may get there quicker, some people may get there a little bit longer, but I think it's important to kind of show up every day with that hard hat mentality, burn the boats and kind of be all in. I think that's very important. It's helped me along my journey. Not look to the right, not look to the left, and just understanding everything happens perfectly. The timing is not on your time. So I think that's very important for sure.
And what would you say, coach? Because that kind of raised me to another thought that you've inspired. Honestly, I've been hearing a lot. It's like, people see you make that game winning shot, or, people wanna see the view of the mountain, but they don't wanna do the climb, if that makes sense, to get you to that top of the mountain where you can see the view. Like, because it's easy for someone to come across your page and be like, wow, like, I mean, he's passionate about what he does. I mean, he's working with high level athletes, but not a lot of people realize the reading articles, really investing in himself, his family, so that he can invest in others, and the ups, the highs, the lows, the downs. Like, what would you say, coach, especially for those who are just getting into that S&C world and environment, just for them to be aware of, like, what is the unseen grind of Coach Nate?
Yeah, I think even before the NAIA director role, I didn't even get hired for a high school sports performance role. I think that's very important for people to understand that again, everything happens
Yeah.
for a reason. I think social media, Instagram is obviously a great tool to connect and to kind of build a network of people, but it only shows your highlights. It doesn't show obviously the downfalls and the pitfalls that we all come across um in our daily lives. I mean, we're all going through it. But again, it's important to kind of reiterate running your own race. Again, not looking at social media, just not envying people that are in the positions that you want to be in. Again, everything happens for a reason. You don't know how much work they had to put in to kind of get to where they're at. So for me, just kind of appreciating that, appreciating my journey. Where I am now was where I wanted to be last year. So I'm just showing, expressing gratitude. I think is very important. Just waking up every day, just being committed to the process. But I think for me, waking up with gratitude every single day is vital for me and my success, for my family's success, having a great foundation. But again, just running your race. Again, everything looks great on Instagram. Everybody has their perfect life. But um, again, run your own race. I think is very important for sure.
And just even as we kind of just think about your journey, I mean, what is just such a dope sport, coach, man. Also, I mean, I'm biased because to me, like because I work in a primary school. For me, I always say basketball is the best sport in the world. I mean, if you look at the earth, it's even shaped like a basketball. So, like for me, I just love basketball because it's something that I'm an absolute nerd at. I just love the people, the connections I'm making, and I've got lifelong friends that we both became friends, and I've been to weddings all from playing basketball. So for yourself, coach, like if it wasn't like you got a filling in the gap here, but the sentence is if it wasn't for basketball, I wouldn't have learned fill in the blank about myself. So for yourself, when you kind of read that sentence back to yourself, what would you put in that gap?
Yeah, I would say I think I have an older brother, so he introduced me to the game at a very young age. And I think for me, I growing up, I actually liked football a little bit more until maybe the age of 7. And then I got into the basketball. But again, basketball, everything from my friends that I have to the coaches to obviously my career. I think basketball obviously has shaped who I am as an individual, the lessons learned from the game, how to win, how to lose, how to communicate, your competitive spirit. What are you doing when you're down? What are you doing when you're up? There's so much lessons that you can learn from the game of basketball. Again, it's not golf, it's not tennis, where you can do it individually. You got to rely on other people. You got to trust other people. And again, that's kind of shaped me to who I am as a man, as a husband, as a father. So again, I owe a lot to the game of basketball for sure.
And just the final one, coach, just before we wrap up, like what, especially now, what would the title of your autobiography be?
I would probably say, good question. I'll probably say it takes what it takes. I think that's also a mantra that I live by as well. It takes what it takes. Whatever, whatever your goals and aspirations are, whether you're a strength coach, whether you're a podcast, whether you're playing basketball, whether you're playing cricket, it doesn't matter. I think it takes what it takes. I think once you understand that, I think that's man, that does so much having that mindset of it takes what it takes. So whether it takes you 10 years to reach your goals, whether it takes you 2 years to reach your goals, it takes what it takes. Whether it takes doing it every single day, countless hours, being by yourself, success is such a lonely road that again, whatever dreams and aspirations that you have, again, it's gonna take what it
Right,
takes.
that's a gem right there, man. It takes what it takes, man. That's and just even on that, like, you got me thinking, coach, right? Because that was
Yeah,
it takes what it takes, man. Because that fits. That can apply to every athlete. Because you're not saying it takes 10,000 hours. You're not saying it takes 2 days. It takes what it takes, man. And just even on that, coach, on the strength and conditioning side, or even just basketball, where do you see um the game evolving to, even on the basketball side, but also on the S&C side?
yeah, I think I start with the basketball side. I think the NIL obviously is tough right now to kind of navigate because it's like the wild wild west. There is no cap. So college right now is turning into the NBA, where we're gonna have to have some sort of rules and regulations on certain things, whether it's contracts, whether it's 2 year contracts, whether it's 3 year contracts. I think the year to years is being tough. I think the goal of a lot of these athletes, and you can't blame them, is to get the most money as you can. So some guys are staying 5, 6 years. I think there should be a limit with that, but maybe 5 years, move the eligibility to 5 years. I think that's going to be very important. Again, that's way above my pay grade. I think we got to fix the NIL because there is some pros and cons to kind of the NIL. As far as strength and conditioning, I kind of like where the field is headed, especially for basketball. Strength and conditioning, I think there's more basketball minds in basketball strength and conditioning. I think for me, I appreciate the skill acquisition of the game itself. These guys are so skillful that I think we have to appreciate that, especially if you play the game and understand kind of what that looks like, the skill acquisition piece. I think it's going to be hard for a football coach or a soccer coach to kind of come into this basketball realm just because the skill level is just so high. I think you got to be able to be a basketball mind. I think it's important for coaches to obviously not just strength coaches, not only to be in the weight room, but get with skilled trainers, get with assistant coaches, understanding the game. I think that's where, for me, it's so important. I've been a sponge just because I love the game itself. I've been around the game my whole life. I've been around pros, Power Five, NAIA. So I speak, live, and breathe basketball, but understanding schemes and understanding philosophies, there's so much stuff to learn from a skill development aspect. Again, making sure that you have a good relationship with skill coaches. That way, you're not double dipping in the weight room. Understanding assistant coaches' philosophies and why that's important, how that translates into the weight room. I think that's vital, and I think it's important for skills development coaches, assistant coaches to be in the weight room, so they can have understanding of what we're doing. So that way, my goal has always been not only peak in the beginning, but also the peak in the beginning, middle, and the end. You want our guys to be fresh. And I think that's going to take communication from the skill development coaches, assistant coaches, PTs, athletic trainers to call all of us to come together for the common goal of making sure that we are at the best at the beginning, middle, and end of the season.
That's key. Not just at the beginning, because even for myself, I say, I'm not really concerned with you making the first shot or when the game is going good, everyone is feeling nice, everyone's in flow. I'm more concerned about, okay, when that momentum shifts, whether it's a full court press, turnovers, or just the crowd is getting into it, what decisions are going to be made there and then? That's where I'm really honing into. So what you just said there is so key. Just being consistent, being fresh, being at our peak in the beginning, middle, and the end. I love that.
Yeah, I also think that for me, I look at the in-season training as 2 seasons. You have your conference and then you have your non-conference.
Okay.
With your non-conference, that's a little bit sporadic. You may play on a back-to-back, you may play on a Tuesday and Sunday. Now, when it comes to conference, obviously let's just say you play Wednesdays and Saturdays. I think you have to approach it from a programming perspective differently as well. I think that's very important. So that's how I look at the in
Right.
season.
Right, coach. This has been honestly a gem, and I appreciate your time. Just part two, being on the podcast, and for those who didn't know, part one I'm going to put in the bottom of the link, but that was audio only. We've kind of upgraded now to the visuals. Now you get to see Coach Nate.
Yeah, I see that.
But
I see that. Yeah, I
for
appreciate it.
for those who just want to just dip their toe in the S&C world and just understand a bit more about how important strength and conditioning is just to be in a high level athlete. And for those who just want to see what you got going on and learn from you when it comes to the socials, where can they find you?
Yeah, let's kind of talk about dipping your toe in. You got to be all in with this. This
That's
is
true.
not something that you can
Yeah.
just dip your toe in and just kind of figure like you really got to be all in. I think that's most important. Again, having that this is what you want to do, and you have a passion for strength and conditioning. You have a passion for helping people out, being a mentor, being a big brother, and actually seeing other people succeed. I think you have to be all in. There is no
True.
stepping the toe in. You really have to be
That's true.
all in. I think for me, having a passion for this, it's a 24/7 job. Whether you're reading research articles, reaching out to coaches, listening to your podcast, and which I love, I think it's very important to be all in everything that you do. So for me, you can find me on, I think it's on Instagram, Nate Melendez _. I post a lot of the stuff on their videos. I also had the research and application channel that upload research articles. But yeah, feel free to reach out to me via DM so we can chat. I'm always open to discussions. Whether you agree with what I post or don't agree, let's talk about it
Right.
for sure.
Right, coach. Honestly, appreciate you, listeners. Those who are listening on Spotify or if you're watching this on YouTube, all the links will be in the description. So this is myself, Coach D, and the S&C. That's just leveled up on a whole new way, by the way. Like this guy's on a
Yeah.
whole nother level now. But Coach Nate, again, man, appreciate honestly just what you're doing. One thing I love is you're really making what that the S&C world, but you're really breaking it down and you're kind of showing what it takes to be at the high level for college players, but what their day-to-day routine looks like in the weight room, on the court, and you're even kind of sharing the time they're getting it done in, the reps, the areas of emphasis. So honestly, coach, man, we, not just me, that we appreciate what you're doing, coach, for real.
Yeah, man. Thanks for having me. This is always one of my favorite podcasts to be on. We always had a good time. It's always free flowing. So I appreciate those questions, man. I really do.
Absolutely. Thank you very much, coach. We're going to catch you guys on the next one.